Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Finance Committee meeting. Today is obviously February 28th. And Kim, if you could do a roll call to establish a quorum, I'd appreciate it.
I sure can. Chairman Tyler.
Present, and apologies for my camera not working.
President Galbraith.
Present.
Vice President Morgan.
Present.
Secretary Scott. And Board Member Tripp.
I am here.
Hi, Gary. Okay, you have a
Hi.
quorum for the 5 board members present.
Thank you. Okay, so first item is to approve our prioritized agenda. If I can get a motion for that.
I move to approve the prioritized agenda.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And if we could get a roll call vote.
Okay, let me just check to who made the motion real quick.
I did, Amanda.
Okay, thank you. President Galbraith,
Yes.
Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Board Member Tripp,
Yes.
Board Member or Secretary Scott.
Yes.
And Chairman Tyler.
Yes.
Okay, that carries 5-0.
Thank you. All right, so next up we have our first report, which will be on the update on the Alliance building from Mike Baker. So I'll turn it over to Mike.
Okay, so Madam Chair, Dr. Cleveland, members of the Finance Committee. So really the purpose of this update is to kind of go over the final cost settlement of the Alliance data building. But more importantly, on December 6th, I did draft a memorandum to Dr. Cleveland. And that memorandum was in regard to very, very specifically how we were going to come up with all the funding in order to not only to pay for the Alliance data center, but also how much money we were going to have to renovate. And so that document should have been provided. I believe it was provided to you in your Finance Committee packet. It's an older memorandum, and the purpose of getting that memorandum to you all is because some of you are new board members and would have not received it when it was first drafted. But essentially, the purpose of the December 6th memorandum was really to do a walkthrough of the bond fund and to demonstrate exactly where the funding was going to come from and how we were going to pay for the Alliance building. And at the time when we were negotiating, essentially, it was my understanding what was going to occur is that we were going to pay full price for the Alliance building, and then we were going to receive a lease payment of approximately $4.6 million, which would reduce, essentially net out a reduction in our total costs. Well, what happened, we closed on December 22nd. The purchase price for the land and the purchase price for the building was exactly the same. But the main thing that changed was what happened to the lease revenue is that revenue went into escrow. Hence, we did not have to pay, actually pay the full price of the building. The net was exactly the same. So nothing really changed. It was just the process changed a little bit at the 11th hour. So again, we paid just under $1.3 million for the land. The fees were about $2,200. The purchase price for the building was $16,010,000. However, we did receive or what went into escrow was a revenue of 4.6 million, which reduced our net. So that's what actually occurred. So little departure from the original December 6th memorandum. I updated it with a February 16th memorandum on specifically what occurred, but essentially the net value was the same. So with that, I will stand for questions.
Noreen, go ahead.
Mike, this is Noreen.
Yes.
Did I understand you correctly that it was $2,200 for fees? That seems very low. $2,200?
Yep.
So what was that fee? And they paid all of the broker fees and all of the other fees. And so we ended up with only $2,200 in fees.
That was for the land only, and then over 7,000 in fees for the building.
Yes, that is correct. So the fees included, there was just under $347 for city taxes. The escrow fee, as far as what we were charged, was $750, $1,064 from First American Title, and then $100 on recording fees, and Alliance Data paid the remainder.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Sure.
Any other questions from the board?
No questions.
No questions.
Thank you very much, Mike, for that report, and for updating with the memo for the change in how those the lease payment was actually worked into the agreement. Okay, so if we have no other questions or comments, we can move on to report B for the Old Shining Stars preschool site update, also from Mike Baker.
Yeah, so I'm happy to certainly happy to report on the Alliance Data building. I mean, that was a really large, large project. It was rather difficult, but it all came together. Unfortunately, one of the projects that has not been going as well as we planned had to do with essentially cleaning up the old Shining Star site located at Rockaway and Northern Boulevard. And so basically what happened was it took some time for us to get all the good furnishings and the equipment out of Shining Star, moved into the new building. So that took some time. And then what occurred, once all that stuff was moved, our plan was to auction all of the buildings, to have those buildings auctioned and sold. The district retain that funding. And then once all those buildings were removed, we were going to come back and we were going to clean up the site. And as you know, the site actually belongs to the city of Rio Rancho. We are on a $1 lease for 100 years. And I think, 28 years or whatever has gone by at this point. So we still have somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 years on the lease. But what happened essentially because of COVID, the people that purchased the buildings, what happened is most of them had great difficulty in actually relocating those buildings and getting permits because of COVID, number one, and number two, because of the construction on 528 and 550. They couldn't actually get a permit to move the large buildings through that intersection. Well, now that intersection is open. We still have about 15 units that are left on the property. Recently, 5 of those units were resold to BIA. But in the meantime, because we were having such difficulty, again, we don't own the buildings. We're only leasing the land. We did communicate with the city, told them what happened, got code enforcement involved. And as you know, that site really has deteriorated over several months. And because of that, because of the vandalism, we did pay to have a fence put up around the property. And maybe about a few weeks ago, we did hire a contractor with some heavy machinery to come in and to basically clean up the site and move a lot of the large concrete debris that really made the site look very unsightly. Today, the site looks a lot better. We're still not done. Like I said, we have 15 units left to be moved. In order to get this work done, we have to go through legal channels, which we are actually doing now. Essentially, we have to we threatened the owners a number of times that they would have to, move those units. Unfortunately, a lot of the owners, and there's I think there's like 5 different owners, which makes things much more difficult. They haven't gotten their permits yet. Some of the units on site are staged or prepared to actually be moved, but I looked at the site recently, and there's probably maybe only 2 or 3 out of the 15 units that actually are prepared to go. So we're going to have to go through legal channels, and what our strategy is essentially is to begin charging a lease to those people that have not moved their buildings off of our site. And so that is our biggest challenge right now is, again, we sold the units. We don't own the units. If we did, we would have moved those units long ago, probably to the landfill, to be honest with you. So we're still kind of muddling through this process. We're still trying to get the owners on board. They assure us that they're in the process, but they're having difficulty, and that's kind of where we stand. So with that, I will stand for questions.
Any questions from the board? Gary, I see your hand up. You can go ahead and go
Madam
first.
President, yep, I have a question. Mr. Baker, so if I heard you right, charging a lease to the owners, that's another difficulty because it would be actually the city that has to charge the lease, or if I'm following your processes correctly.
And it very well could come to that. So in our warning letter, I still have to work out the details. I am communicating with development services at the city. I have, the city manager is aware of this issue that we're dealing with. So they are trying to help us because they want to see the site cleaned up as well. But I think the bottom line is these people that bought these units, I mean, they've had well over a year to move them. And they just keep on coming up with excuse after excuse after excuse. Some of the issues have to be that they actually want to move those buildings onto a city lot. But the problem is that lot has got to be appropriate. It's got to be zoned appropriate. And there's a number of things that they have to do to get that approved, and they're having great difficulty. So the city is trying to expedite that process on their end. And these are some of the issues why it's really taken so long.
So, Madam Chair and Mr. Baker, just a comment. It might be, I guess, in our best interest, if that makes, if I can say that, to get with the city manager and you, or maybe a joint effort to show the neighborhood that we're going through some difficulties, but you are working diligently to, I mean, it might just be good to put something out there in our, as far as communication, because it does look like the city and it does look like we're trying to do everything possible, which I appreciate. But I do know that neighborhood probably wants some answers. So just a suggestion, Madam Chair and Mr. Baker.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion for sure.
I agree. Noreen, go ahead.
Mike, I'm curious, what is the ultimate disposition of that property? Because I understand from AMREP that it was given specifically for schools, and it was given to the city to protect it for the new school district. Is there a plan to request that lease turn into a sign off of the land to us?
There has not been a request. I know, and I don't know if Lauren is on, but Lauren has done some legal research in that regard, trying to hunt down some documents in that regard. That is a number of folks' memory as far as that what was supposed to happen. And as you know, Matt Spangler is out of town. We plan on actually communicating with him and trying to find out if he recalls, and I'm sure he does, the kind of the history of that particular piece of property that was donated from AMREP. So I think as we get closer to cleaning the property up, I think we'll need to come back to the school board. Hopefully we'll be able to answer some of those questions as far as what was the intent. Maybe we could locate some of the old documents back, I believe it was like 1994 or even sooner than that. And so that's kind of where we're at with this. We do need to do some more research, but the research that we've done so far appears that that the property belongs to the city.
Mike, if I could suggest maybe somebody reach out to Jim Wall Sr. and ask him to send a notarized affidavit about the intent that AMREP had with regard to that land, so that that's on record. It would seem to me that would be one thing we could do. Secondarily, it would seem that we should be having a discussion with the council with regard to this, to make it clear that we as a school district need that property. We have a myriad of needs for schools, and that they would certainly want to be a partner with us. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Okay, got you.
Thank you, Noreen. Any other questions or comments? Oh, I see Amanda. Go ahead.
Yeah. What's the acreage on that property? I mean, what is it? What can we put there? I mean, we have we have a lot of different, projects that we need to take place. But what I know, there's like, for so much acreage, you can only put, an elementary school, or I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Yeah, it does make sense. I believe the acreage is somewhere in the neighborhood, just off the base, my memory, I want to say 12 to 13 acres. But some of the complications with the piece is the back part of the piece. It's my understanding, and granted, I'm basing what I tell you on very old conversations, and not that I've actually, have documentation, but we've had great difficulty with the drainage at that site. And it's my understanding that, where the large parking area is at that Shining Star, that there's a lot of underground utilities in that area, and that area would not be conducive to actually build on. So one of the things that really before my time, Al Senna looked at was, before the purchase of the current location of Shining Star Preschool, one of the the issues that Al Sena was requested to look at was what was the feasibility of actually building Shining Star Preschool on that location. And I'll see if I could find that old report, but I know Al reported that that was not a good location for Shining Star Preschool. And if it's not a good location for Shining Star Preschool, it certainly wouldn't be a good location for an elementary school. Now, that being said, we do have different needs. For example, like Cyber Academy, for example, maybe possibly it could be used for something like that, or something other than an elementary school. The problem with the site is the immediate location and the adjacent location to the community. When Shining Star Preschool was there, because of the traffic volume, we just got inundated with complaints from the community. So I'm not saying it's a bad location for a school. I think it depends on what type of school. And so we could certainly do some research in that regard when we come back to the school board on future plans.
Mike, another thought that I have is perhaps the city would like to do a land swap with us to help us be successful. The city owns property in other locations, and perhaps they would do a land swap with us.
That's possible, sure.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the Shining Stars?
I would just add something very quickly just to support what Mike said. We have now very strict regulations about facilities for elementary, middle, and high school, the acreages to start and all of that. It would not meet any of those school needs. But as Mike has said, it could be used for a smaller school like cyber or maybe some other function. But it's much too small currently to meet any of the requirements for an elementary school.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. Any other questions or comments on Shining Stars?
No questions, no comments. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
And I think you did say that you guys are working on some legal action, correct, to be able to potentially just remove the property since it's been left there for a year.
Yes, we have. We had a letter that went out. We're going to have a subsequent letter that goes out that essentially is going to be warning the owners that we will start charging them a lease.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So next item is our monthly operational expense overview and operational revenue and expenditure detail report, along with discussion. And David Vigil will be covering this for us. So David, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Dr. Cleveland, members of the Finance Committee. So these are our, this is a balloon fiesta. Oh, okay. This is our monthly report for the month ending January. The graph on the left will give you an indication of just where our adjusted budget is. The two largest pieces of the pie just represent 84% of our budget is committed to salaries and benefits. And then the chart on the right just shows that all of the different spending buckets, if you will, are just at right about just under 50%. And that is right on track with where we should be through January of 2022. We can go to the next report. This shows all of our revenues that we've received through January of 2022. You'll notice about halfway down on this report, the largest number there you'll see under the collected year-to-date column is our state equalization guarantee, our SEG. And through the month of January, we've received $90,338,932, which is 58% of our revenue for the SEG. And that is right on track with 7 months of revenues. So the other thing I just wanted to point out here is with our indirect costs, towards the bottom of the report, you'll see that we've made adjustments to that in the amount of $353,077. And what we do is we make adjustments to accrue those indirect costs off of our federal grants. Then we budgeted conservatively, and you'll notice that we've collected in excess of that, mostly due to all of our federal ESSER funds, all of the American Rescue Plan and COVID funds, if you will. So those are the things that stand out on that report. If you move to the next page, you'll see here that our expenses, this is our expense report, our expenditure report, these are grouped into our spending buckets, if you will. And you'll notice on the left-hand column starts with 1,000 instruction, followed by 2,100 support services students, and so on down the report. Again, 1,000 is direct instruction, 2,100 is support services, and the farther away you get away from that 1,000 function is kind of the farther away that you get from direct interaction with students. You'll note here on the percent spent column towards the right-hand side of the report, you'll notice that the total in gray is right about 47%, 48% for each of the first 3 categories. And even though we received 58% of our SEG, 46% is actually spent. And that discrepancy comes from the fact that these are our teachers and school staff. And they have essentially what happens is they get started getting paid a little bit later on in the fiscal year. They start getting paid in mid to late August. And so we have some summer payrolls that we pay through the end of June and into July. And so that's why our level of expenses in those first 3 categories are less than what we've received in the SEG. If you'll notice at the bottom of this page, 2,300 support services general administration. You'll notice that number jumps up to 55.72%. And that is expected because these are our district office employees, our 12-month employees, and so they get paid starting in early July, first payroll in July. And so that's why you'll see that number be higher than the teachers and other school personnel. If you move on to the next page, you'll see kind of the same trend here. If you'll see the total for functions 2,400, support services school administration, 2,500 support services central services, and support services operation and maintenance. All of those are above 50%. And again, that has to do with the fact that most of our expenses are happening for our 12-month employees for salaries and benefits. But I'm happy to report that revenues and expenses are on track through the month of January, or through 7 months of operation for this school year. The last page of that report just kind of gives you some definitions of the different pieces of the definitions for the different spending buckets that I had mentioned earlier. So, and that's for your reference. With that, I stand for questions.
Okay, we have Noreen Scott with the first question, please. You're muted, Noreen.
I'm talking away. Sorry about that. Under 2,700 support services, we're at 82.28% expenditure. Does that mean that we're going to be running out of funds before we run out of school year?
$2,700 function is our student transportation, and we always have to supplement what we pay out of the transportation fund with operational here. So no, we'll be fine for that for those bus drivers.
Thank you.
Okay, next question from Gary Tripp.
I had a couple of questions, Mr. V. Hill. One goes along with Noreen's, and that is when you say we always supplement, and I think I have an idea, but can you give us an idea of what the trend's been in the past? How much we've had to supplement to get through transportation? I know that's one of our fights, not one of our fights, but one of our begs, if you will, with the legislators. So,
Madam Chair, Mr. Tripp, I can tell you that in my short time here, I've learned quite a bit about the district, but I know that based on the funding formula for transportation, based on a factor in the formula, we do not generate as much funding, even though we transport more students and we drive more miles than a similar district, Santa Fe Public Schools. And so the trend has always been over the many years that we've supplemented out of the transportation fund anywhere from about $400,000 to sometimes a little bit over $1 million a year.
thank you. I appreciate that. I just kind of thought it was a little less than 400, but I think we can all appreciate that we need to fight a little bit harder in the future for this funding in this category to change with our legislators. My second question goes towards page 2, and when you started talking about instruction and kind of the buckets of the different categories. The last couple of legislative sessions, and maybe we need to ask our lobbyist or Dr. Cleveland, but I often get worried that the Legislative Finance Committee might try to make sure that the bucket in the 1,000 instructions is really good, and all the other things needed for children isn't as strong. There wasn't any changes in any of the legislative moves this last legislative session about making sure most of the funding stays in the classroom or anything like that. That's just kind of a general question, but it kind of worries me when they start talking about how money should be spent.
Madam Chair, Mr. Tripp, that's a great question. I know that there was a bill sponsored by Bobby Gonzalez, I believe, and that was to limit the amount of administrative expenditures that were spent for school districts. And I don't believe that in fact, that bill did not pass, but he's been bringing it up for the past couple of years, or maybe more than that. So it seems like mostly everybody up in Santa Fe values the efforts that are put into administering good public school programs. And yes, we do need teachers, but we also need good administrators to administer those programs. And so there is value in that, but no major changes to speak of, Mr. Tripp.
Madam Chair, David, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Dr. Cleveland, I don't know if you heard anything or not, but
Yeah,
it kind of worries us.
Just a couple of comments. Let me talk to your first question first, and then try to respond to the second. We have run many years, over a million. I think one year, Mike Baker will correct me if I'm wrong, I think we were almost close to 1.5 million. We don't need to work harder. We already have Judge Singleton, who issued the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit finding that transportation was to be paid. And so perhaps our next step is to go back to court and say, as of 3 years later, it still has not been paid. But she was very clear in her decision that transportation was a cost that was to be funded. And so last year, the secretary, assistant deputy secretary, Don Delgado, told me that it would be fixed this year. So we'll see. But unfortunately, he's now gone. And I don't know if there was anyone really continuing to watch that process as closely as we had hoped. But we will continue to work with the legislature, but we have a legal ruling that says that school districts will get their transportation dollars. I would like to also share, with the board, that we have had several visits from the transportation department over the last several years looking for ways that we could save money, which is always welcome. And we were glad to have them come. Adon actually is one of the people who came. They looked at everything and they couldn't come up with anything that we were doing that was not appropriate or was not good practice or was wasteful or anything like that. And so they know we're not getting paid. And I think Mr. Vigil has shared that he and Mike Baker have identified the factor that's probably causing that in the formula. So we do need to work with our legislators, but I am pretty tired of fighting this battle, and we are not alone. It includes Las Cruces, it includes Gadsden. At one point there were 9 districts, and now I've been told it's closer to 20, but I don't know that for a fact. So transportation is at the point where we don't have enough drivers and we struggle with buses. And if they really want us to run a transportation system, they need to provide the revenue for it. So every year we go back to court, and the judge asks us if all the requirements of the lawsuit have been met. And every year the superintendents go and say, no, not yet. Progress, good progress. We're thankful for the progress that has been made. But it has, certainly in the area of compensation, a tremendous gain this year. And so we have a lot of positives, but we need to work on that. We need to continue to work on that issue. And then your second question, Gary, could you ask it one more time? Because I'm not sure I got all of the components of it.
I was just worried.
In terms of the administrative costs.
Yeah, I've seen the recent trend from the legislators in the last few years that it seems like they want to drive money away from support services and administration and make sure there's more money in the 1,000 instruction area. And it scares me that they don't think districts and our district hopefully is the cream of the crop, but I think a lot of districts do a good job in making sure they put their pennies in the right places. And I'm just worried if there was any legislation that's moving forward that's gonna hurt the total unity of how we put this district together and how we service kids. So.
Well, let me just kind of share when I came back to New Mexico, I visited a couple of districts. One was Santa Fe, one was Las Cruces, where I had worked many, many years ago. And I looked at the administrative staff that they had, and to be really honest, I kind of thought, well, they're a little bit larger than what I have, and I wonder if all those folks are needed. And then I realized, after having been here quite a long time, that the administrative needs that we have in the district are created by the state in the first place. And so as they put more and more responsibilities on us, someone has to administer those things, and they create that administration in many cases. So we do need to have a really good dialogue with them. But I can give you several very specific examples of when a bill is passed, and now we have to have people, manage that. And they're generally very good things. So I'm not in any way being critical. What I'm just saying is there's a cause and effect. The number of administrators we have are a reflection of state requirements in many cases. The other is there's a little irony in that, because what we have been hearing for the last 3 years from Santa Fe a lot has been, and from the secretary, deputy secretaries, and others, is boost your social emotional support for children in our schools. So much so in some cases, I had one of the deputies say, maybe we should just spend this year on social emotional, trying to get kids back in track and begin to rebuild our classrooms. And of course, that was not what happened, and that's not what we're doing. But when you start talking about cutting in those areas, it goes completely against what people have been saying. And in some cases, what our boards have been doing in the last couple of years, which is more counselors, more nurses, more support in those areas, because the needs of kids have changed and their families have changed so significantly that if we don't address some of those needs, it's very hard for children to come to school and learn. So there is a balance, and no one wishes we had more money for the classroom. We need it desperately. But we also need those counselors, nurses, and other support folks that we've had to put in just to keep our children coming back to school and in school, more social workers. And right now, what we're hearing on the other end is, well, we don't have enough counselors and we don't have enough social workers. We don't have enough support for the needs that we have. And so in some cases, we're hearing from teachers, I'm having such a hard time doing my job because I've got kids with such needs right now. So it is a very big dilemma that we're facing. But and sometimes I think maybe you could pick up a little frustration in my voice, because it's kind of like, do this. But, on the other hand, when you do it, well, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be putting money here. And we're all trying to balance it. And I know our folks in Santa Fe are trying very hard to do the things that they think are best. But to your point, I think many of those decisions are best left to local boards and local communities to determine what those needs are in any given community. Our needs in Rio Rancho don't look like Gallup, and the needs in Clovis do not look like the needs in Silver City. So I do think that when you get into that area, you sometimes can cause some really serious unexpected outcomes. And that's what has happened a couple of times when we've had those kinds of shifts. People really haven't looked at what the outcomes might be. But I do agree with one thing, and they're absolutely right. And I do agree with Bobby Gonzalez that we need more money in our classrooms. And that is absolutely a thing that we all agree on. That is an important goal to have. So excuse me for taking a little bit of time with that. But I do think, maybe those concerns need to be voiced, and those will be challenges the school board will have to be looking at in the next few years. How do we get more in those areas to support our high need kids? And my last comment is, I think our teachers see that, and in many cases, it's teachers who are asking that we provide better support because they find it very difficult to do the job of the classroom.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. Okay, so before we move on, is there any other questions or comments for David on our employee report? Okay, go ahead, Noreen.
Yes, this is Noreen. I just have one question. What is the expected shortfall for the salaries in that area where we've got 82% expenditure already?
You're muted, David.
I'm sorry.
Hey, David, in this district, when you do that, they charge you $1. So just be prepared. Put the dollar in the kitty. All right.
Thank you. That's the buzz phrase for the last 2 years, right? You're on mute. Secretary Scott, you're talking about the 2700 function in transportation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I believe I believe the last time we looked at it, we were looking at needing at about 1.2 million.
Thank you. I just wanted to know what it looked like. Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
My apologies. One more comment. Board Member Scott, that comes right out of the classroom. That's where it goes. And so when they don't fund transportation, it comes right out of our classrooms, which means that Rio Rancho has less money to spend in its classrooms than other districts who get their transportation paid. I apologize for jumping into that, Board Member Tyler.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. Okay, anybody else before we move on? Okay. All right, so next item, I believe we have athletic, or is item D under reports, which is the athletic gate fees and student fees. Mike Baker, and I believe Bruce Carver is also on for this item. I'll turn it over to you, Mike.
Yes. Madam Chair, Dr. Cleveland, members of the Finance Committee. So the athletic department is requesting a nominal increase in their gate receipts. For example, I had difficulty. Oh, we got it up. Never mind. I was trying to get that. So anyway, you will see the fee increase, varsity sports with the special seating up $1, regular seating up $1, bleacher seating for students basically remains the same, and you'll see some of the other fees again an increase of $1. And so we believe, again, we have a lot of needs in the athletic area. These gate receipts go directly into their budget in order to help pay for and offset the cost associated with putting on their events. And so not necessarily that, even though this is an operational issue, we did want to be transparent and give the school board essentially information that this would be occurring. And with that, let me turn it over to Bruce for additional information. And as well as after Bruce, I do want to continue the conversation into gate receipts and how it relates to student fees.
Yes, thank you. Good evening to President Galbraith and Dr. Cleveland and fellow Finance Committee members. First of all, we want to be very careful as we started talking about this to not soak our community, our fans. So it's been about 6 years since we've had an increase. So as we step very cautiously into this water, we have just a slight increase. We didn't increase any of our student prices, our senior citizens. We want to stay the same. But we did, the only student cost that we did raise was at the very bottom for junior high. Middle school here in Rio Rancho. We did raise it in the middle school because we're basically feel like we're almost giving away those games at $1. So we did move those up to $2 in the middle school. But anyway, this is not going to help us get rid of all of our problems, financial problems that we face every day and challenges we have, but it is going to help us a little bit. We have a projected revenue off of this, maybe $21,000 to $22,000, which is, not a ton, but it could help us. Last year we had a baseball officials increase of $7,000 just for baseball officials. Wrestling officials went up $7,000 total, and then basketball $11,000. So as you can see, that's $25,000 just with officials, not even getting into shipping costs and equipment. We got to think, we have to figure transportation may go up with gas prices increasing, which could really affect us. So lots of challenges with our finance. And again, this isn't going to solve all of our problems, but we think it could help a little bit. And with this slight increase, I'll open it up for questions.
Any questions from the committee? I'll start on this one. So when I saw this item on the agenda, I kind of cringed a little bit just because I feel like it's so expensive for some of our families here already when they have kids playing multiple sports and they have large families to take their families to support their kids. It gets really expensive really fast. So I wasn't thrilled at the idea of raising prices. However, I was a little bit more pleased to see that it is mostly just, like you said, $1 or so for the adults. I do like the idea of having the all sports passes available. I think that's a good option for some families. But again, for families that have kids in multiple sports, they're already paying so much out of pocket for different things that it might be hard for them to come up with that amount of money to buy passes for their whole family. But I also understand the need to offset some of our increasing costs to support our sports programs. So I'm glad you answered one of my questions, Bruce, was to see how long it had been since we'd raised prices. So 6 years seems like it's probably time. Although, like I said, I don't like it, but I understand that that's probably time to do that. So I'll go to board member Tripp has his hand raised. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I can, Madam Chair, I completely agree with what your words, and I think Bruce does too. But I guess my thought is listening to some of the numbers that we're pretty much under, and we don't even know what the end result's going to be with gas price increase. If we're looking at a real modest increase right now, are we going to be coming back in a year, or are we going to be coming back in 2 years, or should we bite the bullet? It's something that I always wondered about. You know, it's a constant battle, but is it something we need to bite the bullet and get the increase in order to balance the budget? I mean, athletics really does take care of a lot of our social emotional needs and a lot of other things that we just talked about, or Dr. Cleveland just talked about. So, and then my question, Bruce, is the all sports pass, that's for everything, right? Middle school, high school, all games, or?
It is. It's for everything. And, we sell a few, Gary, but we don't sell a lot of those, unfortunately. I don't know. Maybe we need to do a better job of marketing those passes in the newspaper, letting people know that really, those that really like to come to a lot of events. But, Mike Baker and I have had discussions about how we can raise more revenue in athletics. And we've been having those discussions, and it's, it's a constant, something we're looking at, finding different ways where we can pay our own way, pay more of our own way, because there are a lot of needs with small projects around the district with, facilities and windscreen, fencing, etc. So those are things we're constantly talking about, looking for ways to increase our revenue. But I do think, in my opinion, you got to be real careful about raising them too high. And no, I agree with you. I don't think we need to come back. We definitely don't need to come back in a year or two and ask for another $1. But I just think we have to be real careful with that.
Any other questions or comments from the board on this? Go ahead, President Galbraith.
Yeah, just a comment. I like that you didn't really raise the student prices. I think that this is a kind of a good compromise, that we can keep the students not going up, but raise that $1 for everything else. So I think you guys did a good job here. And hopefully, I don't know, we are seeing prices go up crazy everywhere. So hopefully we can kind of keep these at this level and not come back and have to change it. But I would rather stay conservative before go up.
Yeah, we have our district tournament. Rio Rancho's going to host a game Saturday at 6:00. Those who are bored and want to come out and watch a good basketball game. But it's the district money. We don't make the money off the district tournament games. Our district does. But our student population is always a lot less because they charge a lot more for these games. And that's something the NMA does, the district has to do. Then the NMA will continue that on to the state tournament. But you won't see near as many students at the games when that price goes up.
Okay, anybody else? Mike, I know you said you wanted to continue this discussion into student fees in general. So
yes, thank you. Yes, Madam Chair, Dr. Cleveland, members of the Finance Committee. So some time ago, I know board member Gary Tripp brought up the issue of student fees and really the kind of that relationship between student fees and in a policy that we were looking at amending, and kind of how that relates to our overall revenue. And so one of the things that we could not answer specifically that particular evening, I was able to locate some of the older documents when we kind of changed that process. So a number of years ago, about 4 years ago, not quite, there was a student fee that was charged to all students upon entering or registering for high school. And so there was a conversation with a previous board member that they believed that that fee was inappropriate because it really went against a free education. However, that particular fee was used for a number of different items that the school found important to, let's say, school spirit or some of the other activities that were not required. And so a decision was made in order to provide the schools with the same level of funding, but that level of funding would essentially come from district office and not from the individual students. So to give you some specifics, what we did in order to essentially kind of hold harmless the schools for not receiving that fee, we did increase what the schools actually get from district office in the form of a budget. And typically what we do is we call that the school's discretionary budget. And what we do is we base that number on their 40-day enrollment, and we multiply it by a particular dollar value. And so in order to compensate the schools, for example, the high school, they saw the biggest jump from $67 per student to $92 per student. And in that way, the schools receive the same amount of money, probably even a little bit more in their discretionary budget in order to pay for a variety of different projects and programs on campus. So they didn't lose money. But I did have a conversation with Sherry Carver, who was the high school president at Rancho, and she reported that she was actually relieved when we did that, because she did receive all the revenue, and for those families that either couldn't pay or refused to pay that fee, she didn't have to continually hound those particular families. And I also talked to Scott Affentranger, and he really reported the same thing, that it was good that they still saw the funding in their discretionary budget, but he was also relieved that he did not have to continually go to families and request that money when they did not pay when they were registering. So that essentially, was the reason why and what happened during that time. The other thing that occurred is right about the same time, a little bit after this, is there was a new regulation that was put out by GASB. We call it GASB 84. And essentially what that regulation stipulates is that we need to tie, when students are paying for something, we need to be very specific on what that fee is used for. So for example, let's say that we have the chess club at one of the schools. We actually have a very specific account for the chess club. And what's supposed to happen is the funding that is raised on their behalf, or the funds that they put forward, that funding needs to be spent on the chess club and nothing else. Essentially, it's their funding, and it's supposed to be used for those particular students. And so kind of the problem with a general student fee is that it gave the administrators discretion on how they were going to use that funding. Yes, that funding was used to support students, but in GASB 84, what's supposed to happen is the students are supposed to drive how they want their money spent. So in this regard, and the reason why that fee essentially went away is because of tying those fees to the specific activity where the students would benefit. And so really this is really kind of to answer board member Tripp's question on that particular evening when this issue came up in regard to charging kind of a general fee to students. And I hope I answered that question.
Go ahead, Gary.
Mike, thank you. I appreciate it. I guess I'm still a little confused because that night I suggested that the word may just stay in the policy so the policy doesn't go away in case we need it in the future. But I wanted to ask you, when you said the high school gets $67 to $92 per student, is there an allocation for the middle school principals and for the elementary principals?
Yes. So the elementaries, they collect a really nominal fee. They went from 42 to 44. The middle schools went from 53 to 63, and the alternative schools went from 67 to 70. So they all saw an increase, but it was the two comprehensive schools that really had the bigger budgets. And so they saw the biggest increase in revenue for their discretionary fund.
So kind of my next question is, when you look back at the student fees, did you see the discretionary report from administrators that they were pretty much giving the money to athletics and fine arts, or did you see that money was going, like with Gatsby 84, was it going to the chess clubs and to the National Honor Society club and things of that nature? Did you kind of pinpoint where the money was going when the change was made 4 years ago?
I certainly the change. I mean, I looked at a number of expenditures. Certainly did not do a complete analysis of that. That wasn't the purpose of our research at the time. But certainly the funding was used to enhance the student experience at the high school. Whether the funding was used to support athletics. The funding was used to support fine arts and performing arts. The funding was used, for example, it could have been maybe additional picnic tables to support the students at lunchtime. There was such a variety of expenditures. It certainly wasn't one area, but it was definitely to benefit the folks at the school.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Amanda?
Yeah, as we talked about this the other day, we have to be really careful because legally, and if you kind of look this up just on the internet, just on charging fees, you have to be really careful what you charge fees for at a public school. And there's been a few districts who have been sued for charging different fees. So I like that the way the policy was written. I think that it leaves, if I remember right, there leaves room for if there is something that needs to be, charged, that it can come before the board and that decision can be made. Of course, for like any, extra classes and things like that, there are certain things that fees can be charged for. But I think we got to be really careful when you put that word may in and we leave as a board and things change and someone just starts, charging that fee again. I just don't think that that's a safe word to throw into our policy. So I think you have to be really careful. I tried to have a talk with Elena Gallegos today, but she wasn't able to get me the information. But I think, Mike, is what you probably looked at is some of the information that was sent a couple of years ago in regards to what we can and can't charge fees for. Was that what you were looking at, Mike?
Yeah, we talked to Elena a number of years ago when we were going through this. So there was a lot of communication between us and the lawyers at the time. But I think what we can do Mr. Tripp, I think maybe we take that same language and we amend it a little bit. And that amendment would be something to the effect that would match GASB 84 regulations, in that if we do charge a student fee, that it would come before the board, and that those student fees would have to essentially align with the appropriate expenditure. So again, if there's funding that's raised for volleyball, that funding needs to follow those students during volleyball, and so on and so forth. And I think, where we have the booster clubs, because that money is raised privately, they have great discretion on how they can use their funding, and that is one of the benefits of having a booster club.
So, Madam Chair, Mike, I don't know if I guess we probably would need to look into that a little bit more, is what I would suggest, because it's my understanding that the booster club funding is really under the school's finance and audit authority, and it's essentially is school money through the booster clubs, because they have to. I thought that was the purpose, one of the purposes of the software system we were buying. So
Actually, yeah, to kind of add to that information, the new software system actually, what it accounts for activity funds. So what happens when funding is raised, for example, for volleyball or football or the like, that funding does go into our system, but it's funding that the school actually receives. The booster club, we don't account for their funding. However, you are absolutely correct that we have the ability, and we're supposed to sign off on the audit, but it's very, very bad language. And the reason why is we're supposed to sign off on their audit, but the thing is they do not have the appropriate financial controls. So we wouldn't even know if it would be a document that we would have to sign, but without the information, without the appropriate information. So the current system that's set up with the booster clubs, we're supposed to basically bless their expenditures, but we don't know all the money that they spend. And so it really puts us kind of in a bad situation in regard to, quote unquote, managing those funds. So we don't manage their funds. We don't dictate what they spend the money on. That's totally in their preview. But you're right. This is something that we do have to revisit.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments in the interest of time? If not, we'll move forward to the next item.
I would like to give Bruce a chance to comment on that if possible. And just for the record, booster clubs are 501c3s, so they have that independent charter, so to speak. However, they use our facilities and they use our name, which makes it then a little less separated than you might think in other situations. And there have been some times when we've had to become involved, but I would like to let Bruce comment.
We feel a lot better about it when they run their money through the school accounts. Let's put it that way. We have a grasp on, we have a money trail, we have paper receipt. We know where the money's going when we run it through the school. So we like that. We've encouraged more and more of them to do that. I think we're down to 7 of them now who have bank accounts still. We haven't forced them out of that because that's something that's always been done. But, Dr. Cleveland and I have had many conversations about it because sometimes it's problematic, no question. But more and more of our people are running their money through the school, which we really like. And it's a little slower. They can't just get a check immediately sometimes. And, it takes a day or two. But if they plan accordingly, it works very well. Just a quick comment on the money, the activity fees that used to be in place. I had a pretty good grasp on that with Scott, not so much Richard when he was here, or Sherry, even when she was there. But I know Scott spent a lot of that activity money towards activities and not athletics. I can't remember many, benefiting from that from an athletic standpoint so much, but he tended to move it towards activity where they didn't have the money, as much money, and needed it for different things. So I know for a fact he did that for many years.
As I recall, but I could be wrong. So I want to say, I would have to double check, but I don't believe any of that money went to athletics. I think it all went to other organizations, and that was the purpose of it, was to provide those smaller organizations who were not able to raise money like some of the larger sports were, to have a revenue stream. So that's my recollection, is that it didn't go for athletics at all. And to just one more comment on that, there are several districts now, Board Member Tripp, Clovis is one of those, that requires, I believe, all of their programs to flow through their district. And one of the things that I hope over time, and I think some of our coaches have already seen it, it's a safety for everyone. It keeps the coach safe. It keeps the money safe. Yes, it's a little slower, but there's never any question about how things are spent or how they're used, and they're processes that are very easy to document and follow. So there are districts in New Mexico who have moved that direction, and moved all of their funds directly under the school district. In some cases, sadly, it was generated by something that happened in their district that made them decide they wanted to not allow that to happen again. But in the case of Clovis, I think they just felt it was safer, a better way to go. So as Bruce is saying, most of our groups have opted now to run their money through. It's such a safety for the coach and for the staff. And so that's something I think we'll continue to monitor and look at over time.
That's
Thank you.
good.
Okay, moving to the next item, item E on reports, is the audit RFP project timeline by Mr. Behill and Mike Madrid.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Dr. Cleveland, members of the Finance Committee. I just wanted to touch briefly on the sequence of events that in honor of transparency, just letting you all know what we're thinking of in terms of procuring our new auditor. And so this kind of just shows a draft sequence of events so that we can make a recommendation to the board for approval of the contract for our new auditors, scheduled for April 25th, 2022. So moving backward from the April 25th, 2022 date, kind of just gives us a sequence of events. Again, there's some flexibility in this schedule, because obviously Secretary Scott and Board Member Tripp are going to be on the evaluation committee. So just know that these are not set in stone by any means, but it does give us a target date to get the recommendation to you all, to the full school board for approval on the April 25th, 2022 meeting. With that, I'd stand for questions.
Noreen?
Yes. My question is, does the current audit team have the ability to apply again, or must we change auditors?
I believe we have to change, and if Mr. Madrid is on, he can answer to that. But I think
We've used the last auditor we've used for two different
two
years
cycles.
now. Yeah. So I think they can reapply maybe I'm incorrect though.
I can certainly.
Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
I can certainly. I'm sorry. I can certainly confirm that and get you that answer, Secretary Scott.
Thank you very much. It's just a curiosity. When were you thinking in this that Gary Tripp and I would be doing the evaluations.
Secretary
got it.
Scott, members of the committee, we have it set in the calendar here for you all for the evaluation committee to get to have an initial meeting on April 6th where we would all get all the proposals, and we'd have a week to review those, and then we
Okay.
would get back together a week later on April 13th to score them. Again, there's a little bit of flexibility in those dates and times based on your availability, of course. But you know, within that week or so, we need to be able to meet so that we can meet our April 25th deadline for the recommendation to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any other questions or comments on?
Madam Chair, Mr. Vihil, this is Gary. I'm okay with those dates and times if Noreen is. So those look good to me.
Thank you, Gary. How about you, Noreen? Do those look okay to you for now?
As I look at it right now, they look fine. Yes.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, David. Okay, moving on to our action, our business. So under item A, we need consideration of approval of the unapproved Finance Committee meeting minutes for December 13th of 2021.
I move to approve the Finance Committee meeting minutes for 12/13/2021.
Board Member Jeff Morgan.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Board Member Jeff Morgan, a second. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call vote, Kim?
Yes, ma'am. President Galbraith,
Yes.
Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Tripp,
Yes.
and Chairperson Tyler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, so next we have just our advanced planning for the Finance Committee. March 9th is the deadline for the governor to act on any legislation that was sent to her desk. And so we'll be hearing lots, I'm sure, in the next 10 days or so about what she decides to put into legislation and any of her line item vetoes. So we'll be watching for that as that deadline approaches March 9th. And then our next Finance Committee meeting will be to be determined. I believe in March we only have one board meeting due to the spring break week. So we will schedule our next Finance Committee meeting accordingly. So I would guess that'll probably be early April. Any questions on that advanced planning or comments?
Just a comment. You know, we hope we can keep it to one. If there was some kind of emergency situation, we might have to ask for a special meeting, but we're going to try our best not to do that. But just know that's always a possibility if something comes up.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Dr. Cleveland. Okay, with that, we've covered everything on the agenda, and we will adjourn this meeting. And we will reconvene at 6 o'clock for our board meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.